So United have the ball in the middle third, and they're up against a vertically and horizontally compact shape, maybe a 4-4-2 or a 4-5-1, and the opposition are doing a very good job of cutting the passing lanes into the players in the centre of the pitch. This is a familiar scenario that we see Ten Hag's side in, but as I spoke about briefly in my analysis video of Manchester United's 3-1 win over West Ham in the FA Cup, which will be linked in the description and in the eye above, there are two different ball progression methods which I've noticed a few teams use recently in order to get around this tactical problem, and so in this video I'm going to be doing a more in-depth analysis on both of those. But before I go any further, let me tell you about the sponsor of today's video, OneFootball, which has become my favourite football app because it has everything you need to keep up to date with the latest news and transfers, providing you with articles to read as well as videos to watch, whilst also being excellent for keeping up to date with all the matches from across the world that are going on, providing a live ticker as well as match ratings and statistics, whilst also allowing you to check your team stats from across the whole season. If you're sick of having to use Google and Twitter to search for news and stats that you want to see, then the OneFootball app is definitely the app for you, so I'll leave it linked in the description below, and by downloading the app you will be helping to support the channel. So when United have possession, with the West Ham game being an example, we usually see them having one or maybe two players on each flank, with the fullback and the wingers being those players. But as we saw against West Ham, this doesn't give United a numerical superiority because obviously one of the wide midfielders, which was Benrahma on the left side, if we're going to use United's right flank as an example, is assigned to United's right back, which was Dalot in this game, with West Ham's left back Emerson being assigned to United's right winger Antony. And so if United can't progress the ball through the centre of the pitch, which against West Ham was because of the positioning of Souček and Antonio cutting the passing lanes into McTominay and Malacia behind them, then they can opt to instead go around the system, but once the ball goes into Dalot, Benrahma can move out to press him, or if the ball goes out to Antony higher up the right flank, then Emerson can push up onto him. But in order to create numerical superiority in the wide positions, United need to stretch the opposition's fullback and wide midfielder, and they can do this by having Dalot sit deep on the right side, almost as a right-sided centre-back, forcing the opposition's wide midfielder Benrahma for West Ham to push up high, out of that midfield line, and by having Antony sit high and wide, this keeps Emerson, the left-back, pushed back as deep and wide as possible in the back line. And because the opposition are unlikely to use a extremely strict man-to-man pressing system, where the central midfielders are going to follow their designated players out wide, Bruno Fernandes can then drift out into a wide position on the right, between Dalot and Antony, giving United a 3v2 in those wide positions, with Fernandes being the spare man or the third man on the flank. And then from here the ball can be circulated to Dalot, and then from here the opposition's wide midfielder is in a dilemma. If he chooses to hold his position and cut off that pass down the line to Bruno Fernandes, then this gives Dalot a lot of time and space on the ball to move the ball out of his feet and look for a forward pass in what I call the quarterback position. But alternatively, if the wide midfielder looks to push out and pressurise Dalot, which Benrahma did for West Ham, then Dalot can just knock the ball down to Bruno Fernandes, who's going to have time to receive the ball and get it out of his feet before the opposition's left back can move to close him down. And so that is the first phase of this attacking pattern. And against West Ham we then saw Bruno Fernandes shift the ball inside to McTominay, who then had the space to get the ball out of his feet and switch it over to Garnacho, and now United were in the final third. But that pass from Bruno Fernandes into McTominay came about because West Ham were using a front two, who was zonally cutting the passing lanes into McTominay rather than having a man designated behind him to follow him. And so what happens if United manage to complete the first phase of play, moving the ball out to Bruno Fernandes, moving the ball beyond the opposition's frontline press, but all the passing lanes in field are still being cut off by the opposition. But with Fernandes on the ball on the right flank, because the opposition are going to be shifting over and the opposition's left back is going to move out to Bruno Fernandes, and from here what's likely going to happen is the left-sided centre-back is going to shift across into more of a left-back position to deal with Manchester United's winger, Antony for example, on the right flank, which then forces the whole back line to shift across, and so the most direct route to go would be a long switch of play to the other side of the pitch, where United's left winger, Rashford for example, is going to have a huge amount of space, and then from here he's got the space to then drive at the fullback, isolating him in a 1v1. But obviously this is an exceptionally hard ball to play off, but if there is anyone in the team I'd trust with it, it would be Bruno Fernandes. And you could just imagine if David Beckham was playing in this modern era, in this Ten Hag side, he'd actually be perfect for this type of pass, as would someone like Trent Alexander-Arnold. But obviously this is a type of Hollywood pass that's only going to be available or accessible to make once, maybe twice a game, so you can't solely rely on this type of long pass. However, another attacking pattern from this type of situation would be having the striker drop off, Weghorst for example, and have Bruno Fernandes feed a pass into him, and from here you could have Antony, the right winger, looking to make a diagonal run in behind, and from here if you can get the ball into Weghorst, he's fantastic at playing those first time balls round the corner, and you could potentially release Antony into one of those one-on-one situations that we saw him score with against Everton and Arsenal. But like the first example that I went through, this is an extremely hard pattern of play to pull off, but obviously it's worth trying because United do have the quality to pull it off. But United could also opt to keep the ball on the flank, for example Bruno Fernandes playing the ball down the line into Antony, and making an overlapping run, looking to lose the opposition's left back who would have moved out onto him, and running behind the left sided centre back who would push onto Antony. However, if the run from Bruno Fernandes is tracked, this would at least pull the defender away from Antony, allowing him to come back onto his left foot. And even from here, if there weren't any forward passing options open, he could still go backwards, with United now having possession back with the back three, only now because United were able to progress the ball down the right flank, the opposition have been forced to drop backwards maybe 10 or 15 yards. And at least now United have been able to progress the ball up the pitch and can look to circulate it to the opposite side, and are slowly but surely pushing the opposition backwards into their defensive third. But I would say that the most basic pass to play from this position, having worked the ball in behind the opposition's front line, would obviously be back inside into the deep lying central midfielder, Casemiro in this example, who should be able to get goal side of the opposition's front line, opening up a passing lane from Bruno Fernandes on the flank into him. And so now within 2 or 3 passes, United have gone from struggling to work the ball into Casemiro with the opposition's front line cutting the passing lanes from the centre backs into him, to now having the ball at his feet and able to turn and play a forward pass. But that wasn't the only ball progression method that I spoke about United using in the game against West Ham. We also saw them use what I referred to as a wall bounce. And essentially this is useful against a deep defensive block like the one that West Ham are using, where there's relatively little space between the lines of the opposition system, and so it becomes incredibly hard to thread a pass from one of the deeper lying players in possession into the likes of Fernandes or Sabitzer between the lines. And so a way around this is to look to thread the ball into Weghorst, who drops off from the forward line, dropping into the space that opens up a direct passing lane from the player with the ball at his feet, into Weghorst's feet, which is usually between the 2 central midfielders. And the first phase of this movement is useful because it will usually drag a centre back out of the back line as they follow Weghorst deep, subsequently opening up a big space between the opposition's fullback and the centre back on the far side, which is exactly the type of space that Rashford needs to make a diagonal run into. And so if you can work the ball into Weghorst, then maybe he can get a flick around the corner. It's an opportunity to potentially get someone like Rashford in behind the opposition's backline in a central shooting position. Or most of the time, as we saw during the West Ham game, Weghorst is used as a player to indirectly get the ball from one of the centre backs or deeper lying players in possession into the likes of Sabitzer and Fernandes between the lines. And because Weghorst is so good at being able to play these one-touch passes around the corner or controlling the ball to his feet and then linking the play with a pass backwards to one of the midfielders, United are able to thread the ball into his feet and know that he'll essentially bounce the ball off, and as long as United have players stationed in behind the opposition's midfield, United are now able to go from in front of the opposition's whole defensive system to now having the ball in front of their back line in a central position. So thank you for watching. If you enjoyed that video, make sure you subscribe to the channel and click the bell for notifications. You can check out some of my other videos which will be linked in the description below. Put your thoughts in the comments section, and you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram for more content as well.